All right, what is up, everybody? We are back with you on a Monday night, and this time, as promised, we are reviewing The Mandalorian. Daryl, we
Yes,
finally get to talk about The Mandalorian.
man. Yes, finally.
We were dying on
Friday.
Friday. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it was killing us. We had just watched it, and of course we had to do our Friday show, and it was like we ended up talking a little bit about it, but it was just like I want to get into it, but I can't. I want to get into this, but I can't because I knew we were going to be doing the show today. So hey, we are finally going to be able to get back into and really go into this because there's actually a lot to get into with this episode.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is like, one of the best season finales like ever. So yeah, I can't wait.
Oh man, I know. And in fact, it actually I don't know about you, but this actually surpassed all of my expectations. Like every single expectation that I had, I was just completely blown away by it. So
Yeah,
it's going to be phenomenal, I think.
yeah, definitely. I mean, like everything that we've done so far, on the Mandalorian, has been, culminating to this point. Um, we kind of made some speculations, some things came true. So, it's
And we'll get to those.
yep,
We'll
yep.
get to those. Like some of the stuff came true, some of the stuff, it was really interesting though because there's almost as like kind of a recap of the season. Basically, there were a couple of things that I had expected at the beginning of this season that didn't end up really coming true. Like for instance, I remember Giancarlo Esposito was talking about, oh yeah, there's going to be like all these duels and all this stuff. We
Mhm.
really didn't get that many if you actually look over the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on, people's, I guess, perspective of what they mean by a lot of duels. Maybe like more
Yeah.
than two, I'm saying it's a lot, or how long they go on,
But you know what
that
I mean,
depends.
though? The way he made it sound, or the way he made it sound was like we're just gonna get like all kinds of stuff going.
And yeah, I mean, like we got a bunch of duels. I mean, now lightsaber duels, not so much. I mean, we got the one with the Ahsoka,
Mhm.
fighting that like magistrate or whatever. Like that was technically a lightsaber duel, even though the magistrate didn't have a lightsaber, but lightsabers were drawn. So technically, what I'm saying? Like you can
Right.
say she battled the Mandalorian with her lightsabers. You see what I'm saying? So it's like
Well, but I
depending
mean,
on her point of view.
the way that he made it sound though was like he was gonna get into it, which of course brings up another point was that I was really expecting a lot more Moff Gideon in this season.
Well, yeah, that's been my biggest thing. Like I was really disappointed in that because I really love the character, and even after this episode, I mean, like I'm super in love with this character because I just love how calm and cool he is, and just how smart he is. But I think what we're going to get is a lot of him in three.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be really interesting to see where they're gonna go from here because they really left a wide open door as far as where the story could actually go and who they're actually going to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we finally kind of see the fate of Grogu, and because of that, I think his story is gonna continue somewhere else. And so that way, we can refocus on the Mandalorian and his adventures.
That's what I'm thinking too. Like, I don't actually think that we're going to get a lot of Grogu in season 3. We
No.
may not even get any Grogu in season 3,
Hmm.
but Ronaldo says, "Hello guys. It's good to see you, Ronaldo.
Hey, man.
Always good. Always good." But yeah, I just think that there's so many different ways and so many different areas where the Mandalorian could actually go. And I'm really hoping that this is a critical time, I think, for the Mandalorian because depending on how they do it, and then of course, we'll talk about it, but we'll have the Book of Fett that's coming out, or the Book of Boba Fett or whatever. And it's like that's gonna be its own series. So it's gonna be, and I'm told, I actually read about it today. The Book of Boba Fett is gonna come out pretty much right before The Mandalorian. I don't know if like the entire season's going to drop and we're going to get that mini series before because we don't really know how many episodes it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably going to be a limited run, you know what I'm saying? And it probably just depends on fans' reaction, how they, respond to it, which is probably going to be favorable because it's Favreau and Filoni yet again doing this. Um, so we'll see, just depending on how much story they want to tell, where they want to pick this up from. I mean, obviously, you probably have to, cover the Sarlacc pit and everything like that. But I mean, I don't know if they're going to go further back to how he became the Boba Fett that we know, in the sense of acquiring the armor and everything like that. Are we going to get all that and what
I don't
he?
know, man. The post credits, you saw it, right? The
Oh yeah,
post
yeah.
credits thing. So it almost looked like they're moving forward.
That's what it appears. But I mean, like there may be some flashbacks. There may
Oh
be
yeah,
some,
there's gonna be
you know.
flashbacks.
So that, so I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just don't know how far they're going to go back as far as telling his story, but they may be moving forward, but still also reflecting back at the same time. Like, there may be certain situations where they're like, "Well, how did you even get the armor?" Well, it's kind of like, be like that Family Guy, kind of like that one
Hey,
time,
remember
like
that time I got the Mandalorian armor?
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that's one of those things that we just have to, keep an eye out for. But once again, it's Filoni and Fav, so I'm trusting those guys.
Absolutely. Well, let's actually get in now to reviewing this actual episode in total, because we're just giving a little bit of a perspective on the season and what we were thinking and maybe where we think it's going to go. And of course, I think we're going to return to that as soon as we're done talking about the chunk and of course the ending. Always have to talk about the ending, but
Yes.
let's start at the beginning. So we're opening and we're seeing basically Slave One chasing an Imperial shuttle. And I thought that was kind of cool too, that they're pretty much opening with some action. I was glad to see, number one, that this is a 45-minute episode.
Yes, definitely.
That it's not going to be another one of these and honestly, I think the last season finale was like around 53 or somewhere in there.
53 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, it was somewhere in there. So it was a little bit, honestly, this was a little bit shorter than I had expected or hoped. But I have to say, though, that after seeing it, and I just watched it a second time, like right before we went on the air here, is that even though it was a little bit shorter than what I had hoped and what I expected, it was satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they gave us was enough. They gave us, and that's the cool thing. It's like you didn't feel, but that's the thing. There was no wasted movement. There was no wasted movement at all. It was, everything was relevant and poignant, and it really just, progressed the story, and it hit all the beats that we that we want in the show. So, I mean, of course, we would have loved to see more towards of the ending, but at the end of it all, you can't really complain too much.
Well, I mean, they have to set up where they're going in season 3, which what I like about it is that it gave us, I was talking to some people about this episode, and a lot of people were saying they basically had mixed feelings. Like, on one hand, you had people that were kind of feeling like we did, like, okay, it gave us basically some closure to this storyline this season, and now it's leaving the door open for what could happen beyond in a season 3 and maybe even a season 4. But then you talk to some other people, and there's been actually some of my friends that feel kind of gypped. They wanted to see what's going to happen even beyond, like what's Mando going to do and everything else. And I can understand that sentiment, but I don't know. I just think that I'm on the whole thing where I think it actually surprisingly wrapped this season up nicely.
Yeah. It definitely wrapped the season up. It did give us a cliffhanger in some sorts, in a couple of different ways, actually. And we'll get into that. But I think that the progression of the story, like you said, it opened up with Slave One chasing the Imperial shuttle.
What'd you think of that as an opening?
Oh, I thought it was great. What I'm saying? Like I said, I always opened up with some good action.
I like the fact that it was the doctor, that you basically got one of the things that I really liked about this episode, I think more than even some of the other ones, is that it was getting right into the meat of the story. And what I mean by that is the entire story arc, like I guess the primary storyline.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of figured this already, but if you didn't know, you definitely know now that, like, okay, this doctor is a cloning doctor, so that's what he does, that's what he specializes in, and then of course, he's giving you details about, and that's the thing. He seems like one of those guys, once again, that if you flipped it, like he seems like the bad guy, but if you really flipped it, you could see that he's just more like just a tool. Like he's just an instrument that the empire is using, or the remnants of the empire, for that matter, is just using to do their bidding. And he really doesn't have an alliance to the empire. He just seems like, okay, they just grabbed me and they are forcing me to do this, and so this is what I'm doing. So the fact that he was able to give up the information so quickly, like he's like, look, I don't, he doesn't seem like he's that
Right.
loyal.
Right. Well, that's it. You know what he reminds me of? He is the Galen Erso of this story. Totally.
Yes,
Where
definitely.
he's basically on the right side because, and this happens a lot of times, and you see this in a lot of movies too. Starship Troopers, believe it or not, comes to mind. Where, and then also, oh man, there's so many different sci-fi movies and everything where they have this to where you basically have our protagonists are taken prisoner or something, right? And they have these medical doctors or whatever, or scientists or something. Usually they'll change from story to story, but it's basically like the gist is they're really on the side of the work that they're doing. They're not
Right.
really trying to, it's not really a for good or for evil.
It's
They're
more so
about the work.
advancing the
Yeah,
of my craft, pretty much.
exactly. Or maybe they're trying to do something beneficial for mankind, and then they end up getting caught up in this whole
Hmm.
military thing where they're, somebody's trying to weaponize their invention or creation or whatever.
Right.
And so what they end up doing is they end up helping the protagonist. Maybe they slip them a weapon, or maybe, they do something like that. And that's kind of what this doctor is like to me. He really cares about Grogu.
Hmm.
And even more than trying to find out what Grogu's all about and maybe get to the bottom of his force abilities and all this other stuff, he really seems like he's caring about the character himself and he wants to help him.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, uh just the fact that even watching those Imperials, like even that one Imperial guy, he's like, look, I'm not with them. Look, this like he totally cut tail and run, man. Like he was just not for the games. Like, look,
And you know what? I
hey.
love the fact that they're humanizing the Empire like this. And especially
Mhm.
now when it's kind of the remnants and, Palpatine's no longer around and, Vader's not around to force choke you if you get caught or whatever. And it's like,
Right.
you know, you really understand that these guys are just, it's like, look, they're doing a job. They're half of the time, they were kind of duped into it and they're not really trying to be evil. They're just trying to get through the day.
Well, like I said, it's no different than any military, saying you believe in the cause, like no different than our guys who served in our armed forces, and they go out and they do a job, and it's like, okay, whether you're a fighter pilot, you're an infantryman, or you're a chef, or on a bridge of a ship or something like that. I don't know why they would have a chef on the bridge, but whatever. Anywho, the point of the matter is,
You know,
I'll let you just, that immediate hunger hits.
those under siege things going, all right, I gotcha.
But yeah, what I'm saying? Like, I just think that, you have, these guys who are just devoting their life to a cause to serve their country or to serve their galaxy or whatever in the best way possible. And, like I said, the propaganda that's pushed upon them, they solely believe and they're just following orders. That's it. And then it's like, okay, look, I don't want to, I'm not that diehard person. Like you got some people who are diehards, and you got some people who just drafted into this.
Well, a
You
lot of it
know,
comes down to the fact of you have the soldiers that are basically following the orders. It's their job. I mean,
hmm
they leave the politics to the politicians and the why and all
right?
that to them, and also the higher ups in command as well. I mean, it's just
Exactly.
those things where
They,
it's you know they this is
they're
what
not trying to be the head. They're their
right.
hands and feet.
It's like, okay, even in a wartime, we'll go take this hill. Well, they don't really know why they're taking it. They just go and take it. And that's a
Hmm.
lot like the Imperials. A lot of these guys are just ordered, okay, go pick up this doctor and, bring them wherever. And now they're under attack and they're not even really sure. I mean, they have to understand a little bit, but again, you have to remember that they actually look at the rebels or even now the New Republic. Well, they basically look at the New Republic as terrorists that took over the government.
Well, and that's one of the things that I really, really loved about that whole scene that we're talking about is it's not the officer that, I mean, you got the chance to see two different schools of thought here, though.
That's true. Yep.
So you got one who, like, could tell and run. He's like, look, I'm not with them. I don't want to know parts. Just let me go. The other guy, who's a complete loyalist, was just like, oh, gotta go. Shot him in the back.
Yep.
But then you have like the other guy who is actually taunting Cara Dune. And the fact that Cara Dune actually kind of was taunting him back when it's like, yeah, I was on the Death Star. And she's like, well, which one?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I thought that
I
was
thought that was
awesome. I mean,
thought that was
whole
great.
exchange was just fantastic, and
Great writing. Great writing on that.
This is one of the things I really love about this show is that they inject humor, but it's more organic, natural humor. It's not forced. It's not okay. Here comes the punchline. They're not setting up jokes. They're not doing all this. It's really capturing the human. It's capturing the humor in a very natural setting and with natural reactions. And that's harkening back to, I think, what people loved about the original trilogy. And that's why, in a lot of ways, The Mandalorian really is the continuation of the original trilogy in a lot of ways. Well,
oh yeah, definitely.
Literally too, because it takes place after Return of the Jedi. But I mean, even the spirit of it, is definitely there. And I think that that's some of those exchanges and everything. I mean, they were hilarious, but they were also very human and very natural. And I think also really punctuated the story in a way that just, like expository dialogue might not necessarily do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that you hit the nail right on the head. It's very natural. It's not like the kind of pull down, like,
Yes.
The whole should I hang up now, or that whatever.
No, man, it's just
it's not like that, but I think that this one was the whole just between, and it really shows you the human side of these characters. You definitely know Cara Dune's very very human, and she doesn't hide her emotions or how things kind of really affected her in a way. But to see the Imperials actually kind of have that whole thing, and we saw that last episode when they were in that whole little cafeteria area where Bill Burr's character, he's Mayfield, he's out there talking to this Imperial like, oh yeah, but what about all the people we lost? What about all this? And he's like, well, for the Empire, right? And this guy is like, I lost, like, there's a million, and that just kind of shows you how big the Death Star was. The Death Star is huge because it held 1 million people,
billions actually.
So my thing is like, this thing is like the size of a planet. And that's what I'm saying. Like, people really don't take that in consideration, that how huge this actual thing was.
Well,
and
the
so
other
the
thing
fact
too,
that he lost that many people, friends, comrades, and there's probably, if I'm serving, this no different than a military base. A lot of times people on military base bring their wives, their children. You're not thinking about those people who are on that base. You're just thinking about Vader and all the, the kids
and Tarkin and everyone, these guys up,
Exactly. But there are kids on this base. There's families that's on this base. There's newborns on this base. And, younglings. Yeah, exactly. And you have all these people who are on this base, and they're all casualties. And I think that was a really kind of a cool thing that they really tried to really bring out in that moment.
Well, I think too that in the novel Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, I mean, if you guys haven't read it, I mean, we've talked about it on the show numerous times, but it really actually directly answers this whole thing. I mean, it humanizes. It was actually, I think, the first step in humanizing the Empire. And the Mandalorian series as a whole, which they started doing it in season 1 a little bit, but I think they took it to another level in season 2. And in particularly in the last couple of episodes, and in this one, you're really seeing a lot more of that. You're seeing the diametric points of view of what these people are fighting for, even more than just, okay, this is good versus evil, or we want the child to use for nefarious purposes, and these guys are trying to save them. I mean, even beyond that black and white issue, there's all kinds of stuff going on underneath. And I think that they're doing a really good job this season, and even in this episode, of furthering that.
Definitely. Let's go to Ronaldo. He says, I think the end of the first season was a little better, but overall it was a great episode. Wow. I don't know if I agree with that one, but we'll go back to that once we get to the end. Uh, Gina
Let's see.
Serrano is becoming more and more a better actress. Definitely,
Oh, without
definitely,
question.
yeah, she's definitely grown since season one. And then the last one, I thought that Boba Fett was going to appear more in the finale, but his absence wasn't really noticed, in my opinion. No, I mean, I think and once again, it's kind of like with Boba Fett, he kind of is like Vader in a way, where they're using him where it's necessary,
Yeah,
and
I'm
that's
telling
one
you,
of the
man.
things I love that.
Thank goodness they're not overusing him because that would be the temptation,
And
honestly.
especially if you know you're giving him his own thing, it's like there's no need. See, I think that's the other thing too. It's like when you know you have something in the tuck, as it were, you don't have to really worry about. Okay, well, we brought Boba Fett in because I understand, like, okay, you don't want to bring this character in and then not use him,
Yeah,
especially since
use
he's
them
so
for like
iconic.
yeah, exactly, or underuse them.
Exactly. So, but at the same time, you know, when you know you have something else greater planned for him,
Mhm.
you can more calmly and more logically now place him appropriately in the Mandalorian, where it makes sense, it's relevant, it's cohesive, and now when we spin off into the book of Boba Fett, it all makes sense now, and that's one thing I'm really, really appreciating about the direction of Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the great things about this, and especially with the advent of Disney Plus, is look, these guys know that people want more Boba Fett. They know that there's more story to tell. They know that this is a great character that they could do a lot with. And so what they're doing is they're wisely saying, you know what? Let's give this guy his own series. Let's not try to shoehorn or jam too much of his story into this other show and actually ruin the tone of the show. They introduce Boba Fett in the show, or I should say reintroduce him, and
Mhm.
then they go, okay, we'll give him a little bit more and we'll expand on his story and his own thing, but we're only going to use him where it's absolutely necessary in this story. And yes, that is such a great temptation to resist, to overuse the character, especially because it's a fan favorite character.
Mhm.
And yet these guys are just brilliantly doing that. In fact, I don't think that they're really over or underusing anybody.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's actually a pretty big thing because, there's a lot of characters there and there's a lot of really good characters. And one of the things that I think that Favreau and Filoni are really good at doing, and of course, you also have to credit, uh, any of the other writers and of course the directors of each of these episodes, is that they're really balancing out all the characters. They're utilizing them where it's necessary, but they're not really beating you over the head with them or anything like that. It's like they're achieving an extremely good balance. And it was really surprising to me throughout this whole season because season 2 is where I felt they could mess things up. You have this really good season 1, and it's like, okay, that was kind of like your introductory season, so people are going to give passes as long as the overall show is good, which it was. But now season 2, this is where things could get a little bit trickier. And yeah, they did some things. Like for instance, it was episode 2, which would have been like chapter 10, I think, where it's like you come off of this great season premiere and then you tell us about the frog lady, right? And it was kind of like you and I said, they really could have just gone right to episode 3 on that. And it would have essentially told, like, you could have included elements from 2, like maybe make episode 3 or chapter 11 like about 5 or 10 minutes longer and include some of that in there. You didn't really have to dedicate this whole episode to the frog lady and the egg eating and the giant spider and all that. But at the time, we thought, oh, you know what? We think it's a filler episode now. But by the time we get into episode or into season 2, now we'll probably look back and go, oh, okay. Well, yeah, we're not doing that. I mean, it's like we're looking back on it now and go, yeah, it was kind of a filler episode, honestly.
Yeah, it was definitely a filler, and I get it. When you're trying to,
Do you though?
I
I
mean,
mean,
I
do
guess
you
what
really
I'm
think
saying
it's
is,
like a filler episode?
I mean, it didn't need one, but I think, you know, a lot of times, you know, with shows, you take people on different highs and lows, and that's what kind of keeps you interested and engaged. You know, you don't want to have a person high the whole time, but sometimes it's kind of like, all right, you know, you kind of have a filler episode here and there. The good thing about it is that they didn't have too many. So the thing
Okay, I
is
see what
like,
you're
okay,
saying.
so if you give me one, like, okay, the whole frog lady thing, and of course, eventually it does. See, if the frog lady thing didn't lead to the episode 3 where they actually meet Bo-Katan, then yeah, that would have been a waste. But at least it helped move her to getting to close him getting to find Bo-Katan. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, and the other thing, you know, and thinking about it too, as you were explaining it, I mean, you're right, because as you're saying all this stuff, it does remind me that it basically showed that Grogu pretty much was starting to exhibit a little bit of a dark behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also showing a little bit more of the you start to see a little bit more of the humanity and the bond of Din Djarin,
Mm-hmm.
and you see, of course, the New Republic coming in, and it was important that they established that, hey, we know who this guy is. He's not just some random bounty hunter that's going around the galaxy or whatever. I mean, we actually know who this guy is. He's on our map. He's on our radar.
Right.
So there were some important things that it did. And, you know, comparing it to music like I often do, it's really more like you play the silence. You know, you're not having just a bunch of stuff. At times you have a rest in music, you know, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like a dynamic thing. And so what they were doing more than likely was bringing the dynamics way down on this in order to set up the next thing, because you're
Yep.
right. You know, you don't want to just be slamming, you know, just
Yeah.
like action, action, action. And
Right. You know, it's no different than like, you know, I always compare it like to a Bond movie. Like most Bond movies start off with like high action or something at the very beginning, but then it kind of calms down where he goes in and meets with M, figure out the mission. You know, he talks to Moneypenny for a little bit. You know, he
that's
goes
true,
to
because
like
I've been
you.
watching them like
Yeah,
yesterday. I
I
cleared
know.
out,
That's I've been kind
um
of following your thing, man. I just watched Man with the Golden Gun.
did
So
you?
yeah,
I'm still on the Connery ones. Like I watched, oh man, I watched From Russia with Love and
I love
Goldfinger.
that one.
I had to watch
Before
Goldfinger because every time I hear that intro now, I keep thinking of that whole
Frasier.
Frasier episode.
Yep,
I mean, it's just like, and it made me want to watch that episode again, to be honest. But
I know.
yeah, see, I'll get to the Roger Moore ones though.
So we'll switch off. We'll just do like you do Connery, I'll do Roger, and then we'll switch.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
about to. I think I only have Doctor No, and that's about it.
okay. But you know, the thing is though, when we're talking about like, you know, with the Mandalorian piece, it's like, yeah, you have to have those little breaks in here just to kind of like and you know, to set up the next thing. Um, so I like that, but I didn't like the fact that it wasn't too many of them. Now, one thing that we said in the outset of this is that because once we realize, okay, you got Bo-Katan coming in, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, you know, and then we still got to figure out what Grogu, we still got to figure out what's going on with Moff Gideon, you know, we got to figure out the whole, so that's like 5 different things that we've got going on. It's like, okay, how are they going to pack this into 8 episodes? And so, like, to your point, I think they did a marvelous job
Mhm.
of balancing it, and it's not, you didn't get too much, you got the right amount of each of the characters to where you kind of find out how they played in this universe currently, and now you can branch them off into other things. So I feel like Bo-Katan is going to stay in the Mandalorian world. I think that's where
Oh, yeah.
she's going to live. However, Boba Fett, you know, his destiny lies elsewhere.
You're right. Boba Fett might be one of those guys that, you know, he comes in and out of the series maybe.
Mm-hmm. And I could see them stopping on Tatooine, like, "Hey, Boba Fett, I need some help, or my ship needs repairing, or
Almost like
you
a
know,
Greef
say
Karga
I'll
type of
just like, yep, exactly. It becomes a new Navarro, basically.
yeah.
So I can see that, and I see, and it's cool, and it's funny how Mandalorian along this journey between season 1 and season 2, you see how he's acquired these friendships. You know, first he had Quill, now he's got Greef and Kara. You know, so he's met both of them, and they've all been. I mean, Greef has always been like his kind of, I don't want to say his boss, but his kind of like supervisor or whatever you want to call it. But he met Kara, brought her on board. and then now he's met Ahsoka. She's cool. She's on his team. So he has different points now where he can go and get information, knowledge, help. So I can see all these people in their own respective series, but I also can see them also guiding him along the way as well.
Well, and they were starting to do that in some of the previous episodes. And also, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, they achieved an amazing balance because I thought there is no way in the world they're going to be able to jam all these characters. And not only did they not step on each other, but they brought them in at perfect times, which of course brings us to the next scene where now they're meeting up with Bo-Katan and her two, Mandalorian
Yeah,
sidekicks.
women,
I
yeah,
still,
sidekicks, yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
still don't remember their names or anything like that. But and the guy kind of disappeared. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just gone, which
Hmm.
is okay. But then you get this little thing that I thought was really interesting between them and Boba Fett. They see Boba Fett and they're like, "Oh, you're not even a real Mandalorian," and all this other stuff. And I'm like,
Right.
"Whoa!" They got some.
You don't want to. You don't want. Don't tempt the Fett.
And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, okay, what's interesting to me about that scene? Well, actually, there's a lot of things, but one of the primary things for me is that Boba Fett talks about how his, Django basically helped in the Battle of Mandalore, and he's like a foundling, and all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden now you got Bo-Katan going, "Oh, you're not a real Mandalorian," and "As my father, you mean your donor?" And just like,
Yeah, it was some shots being
yeah,
fired. Definitely.
I mean, a little bit of shade going back and forth, and I mean, yeah, I've heard your voice, you're a clone and all this stuff. And
Yeah, I
I'm
was
like,
just like,
dude, I mean,
yeah,
all he did was walk in the room, It's like, I mean,
yeah,
he
but
didn't even say anything. And Boba, to his credit, at first anyway, it was just like, listen, I don't know what your deal is, but you might want to put some treble on that tone,
that's
as Forrest
yeah,
Day said in Graffiti Bridge.
yeah.
What do you
I
think
mean,
was up with all that?
well, I mean, it's a culture thing, and that's one of those things that I really like that they bring in Star Wars is a culture thing, and it's funny because um a lot of people really don't understand the significance of culture, and that's a big part of the Star Wars universe is you have a lot of people, like the culture of the Jedi, the culture of the Sith. You have culture in, these other alien races that you have to be mindful of and be respectful of. It's one of the things I loved about Star Trek actually is because Picard always made sure that, you saw this a lot in the Next Generation, where he always made sure that, like, okay, if I'm going to visit this, race, I want to learn to make sure I say their names correctly, or I want to, read this text, in the true way that it's supposed to be written to honor people and to respect people. And I think that's one of the things that you're starting to see now in um
Star Wars.
in Star Wars is that I know, right? It's in Star Wars is the fact that we're starting to see like a lot of cultural things, and Mandalore has always been like a proud nation or a proud. They're proud to be warriors. It's kind of they're almost kind of like Cleons in a way. Like
Yeah.
if you really if I can make that comparison where they believe in the
Yeah, be
culture.
careful.
I know, right?
You know what's interesting to me, though, about Star Wars versus Star Trek in that regard is that Star Wars, it's almost like in Star Trek, everybody's like trying to do the right thing. It's more of a utopian like ideal, like this is what humanity is attempting to do.
Hmm.
Star Wars is a little messier. It's
Yeah.
really more reflective of how things kind of are,
Are.
I mean,
Yeah.
because it's true, you have like the Mandalorians and the Jedi were enemies, and so they're a little bit wary of each other and stuff like that. And then you have even within the culture, because we're talking about Mandalorians here, okay, you're not a real Mandalorian, you're not. I mean, how many times do you hear that in various cultures?
Well, yeah, but, like, and I was just going to say, like, even in one of the biggest things, like religion, you have different factions. So even in Christianity, you have different factions. You have like Apostolic, Baptist, you have Presbyterian, you have all these different Lutheran, you have all these different Catholic. What I'm saying, you have all this stuff under the umbrella of Christianity, or in Islam, you have the traditional, you have the fruit of Islam, you have all these different factions within the umbrella, or within the umbrella of Muslim, or in that culture, and they kind of subscribe to different ideals and things. So
Right, and then you
I,
add, like, an exposure to another, like, going with that example, perfect
right.
thing is Middle Eastern person, you know, moves from whichever of the countries, right?
Hmm.
Moves to the United States. Okay, well, now the kids start to adopt some of the Western culture,
Exactly.
and now there's a little bit of
With
a and that
clash, because at home they want you to still act as if you're
the old
in the
country.
whole
Yep.
country, right? But we're here now, and this is where what everybody else is doing, and so
And see, this is the vibe I'm getting for the Mandalorian culture specifically because,
yeah,
you know, you have a couple of things, but you're basically seeing that there's some attempt to understand, but then there's other situations where there's clearly some biases.
oh yeah, well definitely,
Borderline racism, but some biases between these people. Because obviously, I think that there's gonna be and I'm wondering if they're actually gonna expand on this a little bit, like the foundlings versus the true Mandalorians.
hmm,
Because so far, whenever people have talked about foundlings, it's been in a more positive light.
right,
With Boba Fett, now granted, I mean, I will say this though. Boba Fett hasn't exactly been, shall we say, the poster child for Mandalorian culture. You
no, he is
know,
not,
he's kind of a criminal and he's a notorious one. So that might be why there's a little bit of a, oh, it's you kind of vibe, you know? And it was kind of a known thing that even really in the old expanded universe, and this carried on even in new canon, is that the Fets were kind of looked upon as almost traitors.
yeah,
You know, they were kind of, you know, giving the Mandalorians a bad
black sheep of
name.
the, yeah,
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's no different than anything else, you know, and it just
yeah,
it's one of those things that I think is going to be very interesting because I thought that that was interesting that they brought it up in this episode.
yeah, because I think it's gonna come. I think it's gonna factor in later.
Oh, yeah.
Ronaldo has some stuff. He says, ironically, Peyton Reed directed the final episode, and he made us feel bad and good at the same season. I agree that Bo-Katan will stay in the Mandalorian, with the subject of who owns the dark saber gives more than one season. Now that, yes, and we'll kind of get to that. Um,
Absolutely.
Even everything Bo-Katan said to Boba Fett was a blow to the guts. And Dwight is here. Boba's not a foundling; his father was.
Yeah, well,
I guess that kind of makes him a foundling by default, by lineage. I guess if you
I mean, the thing was is that
from a certain
yeah,
point of view.
and you also have to go back to that. I mean, I don't remember it verbatim, but when Boba was basically saying why he should have the armor, why, you know, because of course Din was kind of like, hey man, you got to give that up. You're not a real Mandalorian. And it's like Boba was like, well, but here's the thing.
Well, neither are you really, but you know.
Well, I mean, the thing that's kind of funny about that is the whole Mandalorian culture has basically been fractured. And now you have this. One of the things I think is going to happen in season 3 is I think you're going to see more of the power struggle that's happening on Mandalore.
Well, yeah, well, definitely. And Boba Fett alluded to that. You know, he's like, "Why are you trying to save Mandalore? The Empire like wasted that place. Like, you should just move on." But see, that's because he's not from Mandalore. So that's what Bo-Katan is basically saying. Like, this is home for me. This isn't home for you. So that's why you don't care about it as much as I do.
Well, and then Dwight goes on to say, and he also said he doesn't claim to be a Mandalorian. Yeah, he said that to her, but he was saying a little bit different to Din. See, I have a feeling that Boba is kind of, first of all, he likes to push people's buttons. I mean, I don't know how much you've
Mhm.
actually read in the whole grand scheme of things. I mean, beyond the movies and all that stuff, but Boba Fett's one of those guys that he has a very chameleon-like nature as far as when he's dealing with people. He'll shift his story, I guess, which has actually been really difficult to follow because, of course, first he was, you know, before Lucas changed the whole canon on us, they made the whole background story that he was Jaster Real and he was basically he was a Mandalorian. And then they changed the story again to where no, he actually just took the armor and all this stuff. And then, of course, George Lucas came around in the prequel trilogy and came up with the Django character, and now Boba was an unaltered clone. So, you have a really I'm really curious. That's why I'm not really saying too much on this show in any capacity, too much about the Boba Fett character, because now I honestly think that Disney is fleshing it out. I think that
I
they're
think that's what
giving
yeah,
us the actual story now.
and I think that's why we get in the book of Fett, the book of Boba Fett.
Yeah. I think that the Book of Boba Fett is going to primarily be okay, here comes the definitive Boba Fett story. And I think we're going to get a little bit of the origin, like you were saying. And I
Mhm.
think it's going to carry on from there. And it's going to take all these different elements that we've had over the years, and it's going to put it together in one cohesive story, which I would welcome because, again, I like elements of a lot of the different stories that we've gotten about Fett over the years. Like I said, I mean, when did that figure come out? It was in between A New Hope and Empire. So I'm going to say 78, 79. I'm going to say it was around 1979. When I got the Boba Fett figure, he wasn't even an officially released figure yet. The holiday special had come out, so you actually, you saw Boba Fett. Then they released a figure, and what you had to do is you had to buy like 10 figures and cut out a proof of purchase of those 10 figures, send in the proof of purchase plus like shipping or something, and then you got the figure. So I actually had the Boba Fett figure before Empire Strikes Back even came out. That's how far back I go with this guy. So since 1979, I have been basically following him and looking at all these different stories. And so I, for one, am really excited to get a cohesive, here it is.
You're kind of a foundling.
Yeah. Hey, man. I mean, and there's a lot of interesting, like I like the dynamic on that. And I like the fact that eventually they sort of push the buttons and they have a fight. And I have to say too, I really like the fight scenes in this show.
Oh yeah, I mean, like
Because they're not just good action, but they mean something.
yeah, I mean, there's actually a point behind it. Just the whole sidekick thing. It's like this little kid is like talking crap to Boba Fett, and Boba's like, you don't have no idea who you've been talking to. And it's like, every now and again you got to put that young one in their place sometimes, and but you can see that she's no slouch either though. you know, so I think that that whole scene, and the fact that they use like a lot of the same tactics, to fight each other, and then how they kind of prepared for like Boba's kind of expected the whole torch thing, and he kind of had his arms up to block it, and just. But then Bo-Katan being the voice of reason, saying like, if we had fought this hard, we would have actually kept Mandalore.
Yeah, man, I love
I love that line.
It was so good, and honestly, that line was so unexpected.
It was.
I just figured she's gonna be like, guys, we're on the same side. But when she actually added that, I'm like, okay, that was just that little bit of a knife twist. But it's a good point though. And one of the things I love about this show, and you see it a lot, pretty much culminated in this particular episode, is the fact that everybody is kind of aware of their situation.
Yeah.
That's something that I really find that's interesting about the characters in this show versus some of the other ones, because they get it. They really do. And of course they're presented with situations, and of course we're learning about this universe, at least this part of the universe, through Din's eyes.
Right.
And so as he finds out things, we find out things.
Well, speaking of Din, one of the things I did enjoy about that one scene, since we're still in this whole little cantina segment, was the fact that, as Bo-Katan was like, okay, wait, you know where to find, Gideon? All right, well, yeah, we'll help you. And, he's like, look, you can take his cruiser, you can help start Mandalore all over again, you could do whatever you want. And so she's like, well, he's in possession of this weapon, I needed to rule Mandalore. He's like, look, you can have whatever the heck you want. I just want the kid. That's it. Like whatever else happens, that's up to you. And you really once again see the growth of emotion that Din has for Grogu, and you see like how dire he's like. I'm willing to give up everything, like all this stuff I could use. He doesn't even have his own ship right now. He could have used that, but he's like, you know what? I don't care. I just want the kid.
Yeah, it's really amazing to me how you saw, and what's weird about it is it was kind of a slow burn or even a slow build where And then all of a sudden it was like an explosion to where now he's just all about this kid. And I think that the turning point came in the last episode. I think it was the last episode where um he was in the Imperial base and he had to take off his helmet in
Mhm.
order to access the terminal or whatever. And it's like that was a big moment. And I think that that was the moment that taught him. That was the moment I think he came to a self-realization like, wow, I really care about this kid.
Yeah, I'm willing to do whatever
And
is
I'm willing to
necessary.
do whatever it takes. And now that that emotion has been just basically blown out, he's now just like, yeah, man, I got to get this kid. I've got to do this, you know? And to me, that's making the show more exciting and more meaningful. And you're
Mhm.
right. That was a great thing. It's like he doesn't really care about all this other peripheral stuff that's going on. He has one singular purpose.
Right.
And that's it. And I like the fact that the way that they're handling Boba Fett in this too is that Boba's basically he's a mercenary, but he's true to his word. He's like, "Look, I said I'm going to help this guy get this kid, and that's what I'm doing."
Yeah.
You know,
Ronaldo
and
says, "Oh, um, what Dwight said, it's like, haha, you're kind of a family."
better than a youngling.
That's true. um, Ronaldo says, I found it very interesting that every time Din Djarin wanted to recruit someone and they refused, he just said they have the child, and automatically they were interested. I thought that we were going to see Cobb Vanth, but I really think we will see him in the Book of Fett. Yeah, definitely. I definitely think he's going to pop up again in the Book of Boba Fett.
And
Especially
Dwight
with
thinks that
him.
that was interesting too.
Yeah.
That
So
they basically said that, and that's a really all
good.
those are
Yeah.
good points. And actually, I thought that Cobb Vanth, I kind of thought there was going to be this whole like almost Avengers vibe
Yeah.
where all the
He's gonna,
people,
I
you're going to
thought
get
Grief
Groot,
Cargo was
yep,
going to pop up.
right,
And
gonna get all these guys, and it was gonna be that kind of thing. But again, I think it was a brilliant decision not to do that because that would be the temptation, and that would be the thing that virtually everybody would do. I love the fact that in this show you can meet a character, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're there for the rest of the journey
Mhm.
or solidly. Yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that Cobb Vanth is going to be back for season 3 because number one, he's actually more important than a lot of people realize because he's one of the first novel characters that we get. They have this whole other thing with all the Star Wars books and stuff like that. And he comes from the Aftermath trilogy. And I think that it's just great that they're starting to bring in the books, comics, that kind of continuity into things. So I don't think that that was an accident that they put this character in and they introduced him. But I think again, this is more of an introductory thing, and then we're going to see this come to fruition in season 3.
Definitely. All right. So then let's see. So after we leave the cantina,
Yeah, I know. I'm trying
um,
to remember. I just saw
so
this.
now they're on their way to, they've tracked Gideon's ship. They kind of come up with their whole plan about how they're gonna
Oh, this
sneak
is when
aboard the ship.
and the doctor's with him at this point, right? And he's telling him
Right.
where the dark troopers and all this other stuff is.
Yep.
Wasn't that the scene?
Yep.
And this is where we actually find out a little bit more about the dark troopers. We find out like, hey, these dark troopers are droids, and they eliminated the final weakness, which was the humanity, which I
Hmm.
thought was a really poignant thing for them to say. I don't think that that was just a throwaway line. I find it interesting that the Empire, because there's a couple of things about this. Number one, they've long talked about weakness and things like that, and they're realizing that their humanity is their weakness. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this is that they're coming full circle. They start out when Palpatine was starting his whole plan where he had all these battle droids and everything was all droid based.
Hmm.
But then it's kind of like, these droids don't have critical thinking and all this other stuff. So then he made clones. And then it's like, well, there's a little bit of a problem with the clones. So now we'll just get people. And now it's going back to droids again.
Yeah, I think with the whole Dark Trooper thing, it's funny because one of my friends brought it up. He was like, they kind of ripped off James Cameron's Terminator. As far as with the whole Dark Trooper thing.
You
That's
know
how.
what? It's a combination of that. And you remember the movie Black Hole?
Yeah.
There is a a droid in there named Maximilian, and they kind of have that Maximilian vibe. If anybody that's seen the black hole will instantly know what I'm talking about, because that's what the Dark Troopers are a lot like to me.
Yeah, and I thought that the Dark Troopers are cool because, and I love the fact that like, okay, they do kind of have a weakness in a way where they draw too much power,
Yeah, I thought
so
that
you
was
have to
cool.
keep them cold,
Mhm.
the whole time. But once they did kind of execute their plan, and they kind of storm the ship, and now they're on, now they're on the ship, and and now they're like taking out all the different stormtroopers or whatnot. So now, of course, Din Djarin is, he's sneaking around the ship or whatever, almost kind of Obi-Wan ish, and he's trying to, get to the Dark Troopers before they're activated and whatnot. And so then, of course, he doesn't make it in time. So now one kind of comes out of containment, and he has to deal with them, and he's realizing that like everything that he's got pretty much doesn't work until he uses, that good old Beskar staff. So
Well, and that's the thing too. I really like the whole concept of the Beskar staff. I think that was actually a nice addition to everything. Is that it's really a nice weapon for him to have.
yeah, it's very to his culture, so to speak. And Beskar is kind of is once again you learn about like, okay, well dang, this is the one thing that lightsabers and things can't cut
It's the
through.
animanium of the Star Wars universe,
Exactly. Or vibranium, if you will, if you want to go Marvel.
But I mean, the thing that's really kind of cool about this whole thing is that, of course, and I didn't really catch it until after the end, where it's kind of like, okay, now I know why they're putting this in there, because they have to show you how tough one of these things is to beat, and
Hmm.
how a dark trooper is pretty much almost unbeatable for most people.
Right.
And even one of these guys is, I mean, because like you said, Din was basically throwing everything he had at it.
Hmm.
Nothing was working.
Yeah, he set the thing on fire. He let his little whistling birds loose. It just nothing was, and he was just getting kicked around like, like it was like he was nothing. And so it wasn't until he brought out the Beskar staff and was able to kind of like get between the two plates, so between the neck and the body, so he was able to just finally defeat the Dark Trooper.
Well, and the other thing that I liked about that too was the fact that, again, one of the things that's great about Din is that he does strategize, even in battle.
Yeah, I mean, like he's resourceful, and he's
Very
always
much
kind of
so.
looking for a way. And just I love how he just like ejected all the rest of them out throughout that
That was great. I did not see that coming, because the whole time I'm just sitting there thinking, because what I mean, there's a couple of things that were so funny. It's like, this Dark Trooper keeps like punching on his helmet, and it's kind of like, okay, dude, it's
man. That was a great scene.
maybe try something else now. You see this isn't working, maybe do something else. But
Well, that just shows you like how powerful that Beskar is, man. Because
I
like,
know, man. Well, he should have had a concussion, though. I mean, it's like,
I mean,
yeah, the
still,
Death
yeah,
Star was, but I mean, his head's like,
that
you should have like
that
boxer's brain or whatever.
yeah, it's like one of those Tyson shots, man. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
I'm
Or what was
surprised
that
he was able.
movie? Oh, was it just called Concussion? The one with Will Smith where he played
Oh
that
yeah,
famous
that
doctor?
doctor.
Yeah,
Yep.
gonna have to see that guy pretty soon.
Yeah, man. So now, okay, we've gotten to the point where okay, Din has defeated the Dark Trooper, and then now he faces off. He takes out the Stormtrooper, which was kind of cool. I even like the way he did it. It's kind of very espionage, but
Yeah, there was a
he just
little bit of Andor to me in that.
yeah,
There's a
a
lot of
lot
like
of
a
that
whole Cassian Andor vibe, and in fact, that's sort of who Din reminds me of in a way, like a Mandalorian version of Cassian Andor.
definitely.
Not just because of the heritage. I mean, it's kind of like, I know people instantly like, yeah, okay, but no, that's not it.
So then like he opens the door, and there's Moff Gideon standing there with the dark saber right above Grogu's head, and Grogu's looking so cute and helpless.
Man, I know he was just so adorable. Like Grogu was completely adorable in this whole episode. It was just like my heartstrings were being plucked like Stradivarius. It's. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah,
Little
and
tiny binders, you know?
yeah, it's like they even had little handcuffs for the stupid
I know,
thing. It was like
it
it's
was
crazy.
awesome. It's got these, like, little baby binders that I thought were just hilarious.
So now you have Gideon, and this is the part where I loved. I loved this scene.
Oh, this is actually, to me,
I mean,
not
like
just
one of
one of
my
the best scenes
favorite
of the episode, but, like, the whole season and maybe even the series.
because this this had elements of Dwight because when Gideon was just like, okay, here's a little tidbit. Assume I know everything. That's such a like that's such a Dwight line. Like Dwight would say that to us one of these days. But I just love the fact of how confident, how sure of himself he was. Um, he was so intelligent. The fact that he knew, like, okay, yeah, your wrist launcher has already fired this, only round. So I know you can't use that against me. He kind of basically laid out everyone's plan. Like, okay, yep, Bo-Katan's probably on the bridge, but I'm not there. She's looking for this. And once again, you see Den's like, yeah, you keep it. I don't care. Like, just give me the kid. Like, that's all he wants. It's just give me the kid. And so then he's like, well, Gideon realizes, all right, I see your bond, with this thing. And I thought Gideon was actually going to be cool and just
I
like,
know. For a
I,
second
I mean, he was truly kind of believable for a second, but I was like,
For a
it can't be
second, I
that
was
easy.
falling for it, but then again, though, because he sold it, though, he was basically like, "Look, I got his blood. I pretty much got everything that I needed."
I need it. You could take him.
For a second, I thought, "Well, all right, maybe he's gonna do it," and then, of course, he doesn't.
Right. And I think he was kind of, surprised that, that that lightsaber, that dark saber didn't go through that Beskar.
Yeah, that was one of the most satisfying parts. It's like, yeah, you thought you
Yeah.
were cool, didn't you? But you're, like,
Yep.
wailing on him, and
Mhm.
it's not having any effect, and now he's probably like, "Uh-oh."
Right. And then now he actually has to fight against Mando, which I thought was really cool, is because actually Mando bested him in combat. You
Yeah.
actually really got the chance, because I thought they were going to make it, Moff Gideon like this, this crazy fighter, but it's like this dude shouldn't be able to beat the Mandalorian.
No,
And
and
he didn't.
that's true. That was one of the things. There's actually a lot of refreshing things in this whole scene because on one hand, we couldn't, and we've brought this up in a couple of previous shows, actually, the last show and a few. Well, anytime we do a Mandalorian review, we talk about this too, where Gideon is obviously somebody different from the rest of the Imperials. Now, you brought up on the last show that a lot of this had to do with he had more information
Mhm.
than your average Imperial.
Yeah, definitely. But him being ISB, and that's one of the things that I really love, because you kind of saw he definitely has like this Tarkin vibe to me.
Kind of
And
Tarkin meets Thrawn, actually.
yeah, exactly. Like if you
Tarkin meets
combine,
Thrawn, and
yep,
he's
but just not as powerful though.
right, right. Like Thrawn would just
Oh
mow
yeah.
him down in a heartbeat. But I mean, the thing that's cool is he has a little bit because the fact that his outfit is kind of like a Vader kind of thing. I think there's significance to that. I really do. I think that there's something. I don't think he's fanboying out on Vader or anything like that. I think that there's something. I didn't you say that maybe he was an inquisitor at some point or something? I
Well,
remember
I
you had
think
some
well,
theory.
it was a theory that like he was over the Inquisitors, or he was maybe like one of the supervisors, I guess, if you will.
Oh,
I mean,
maybe that's what you were
of
saying.
course,
Yeah.
like like Vader, of course, Vader's like the ultimate, but I
Sure.
think that, with ISB, I think they kind of like worked hand in hand a little bit. I think ISB kind of found out the information, they were able to acquire stuff, and then they dispatched the Inquisitors to, what I'm saying? Like that type of vibe.
Yeah.
Um,
Dwight Dwight basically has something interesting that kind of ties in. That's why I want to bring this up. He says, "Do you think Gideon has some kind of tie to Mandalore or just a pillager? He knows quite a bit about the rules of the dark saber." And that
well,
kind
that
of ties into what we're talking about.
well, see, that's the thing about him, though. It's like that whole faction, the ISB is kind of like, if you look at government, they're kind of like the CIA.
Yeah.
They're kind of like one of those groups that's kind of, and he's been pretty much like the director of it.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
he's kind of like the director of the CIA. So he's like, I'm paid to know things. I'm
But I gotta side a little bit with Dwight on this too, though. I think that there's significance that he knows it's almost like he knows too intimately a bunch of stuff. Now, they
Well,
did imply that he's the one, because here's the thing that's kind of weird about this when you follow it from the Clone Wars is that at some point Maul had the dark saber. Now it's been when you do the whole, well, actually it came up in Rebels. Rebels was when, well, I think it actually was in Clone Wars, and then it ported over to Rebels because Sabine ended up having it. At one point, Maul had it.
mhm.
So it almost sounds like Gideon took it from Bo-Katan. That's
Yeah,
the way he made, that was his implication anyway. Now I don't know if that's
right.
actually true or not. And I'm starting to think that going along with Dwight's comment here is that we're going to find out a lot more about that part of everything in season 3. Or at
Oh,
least I
sure.
hope so.
Yeah, that's definitely where it leads to. I think let's see, Ronaldo says the Dark Troopers reminded me of the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica.
Yep, they had a
Yep.
little bit of that vibe too. In fact, I would
Yep.
go as far as to say Cylons meet Maximilian. Seriously, look up the black hole Maximilian, the little robot with the blades and stuff. You'll see what I'm talking about.
He also says, honestly, I thought it was better for Gideon to fight Din Djarin instead of Ahsoka.
I did too. I did too, and I thought, see again, this is why those guys are so brilliant, because the money would have been on that he would have fought Ahsoka. That would have made the most
Mhm.
sense. But
Right.
he didn't. And it was more meaningful because Din wasn't fighting for honor. Din wasn't fighting for the greater good. Din was fighting for Grogu.
Right.
That's what Din was fighting for.
Yep.
And that
It's
was
basically
something,
love.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's corny as it sounds, it's so true. And that's why, honestly, I cried at the end. Most people were tearing up at the big finale. You know what I was crying over? When he removes his helmet and Grogu
Yeah.
kinda touches his face and, like, tears are streaming down. I'm like, "I can't believe I'm crying over th," but, I mean, I was, because it was moving and it was touching. And that
Definitely.
was one of the things that I thought was just so awesome about the battle was he pretty much made it clear, "Man, all I'm interested in is the kid.
Right.
I don't care about any of this other dark saber ruling Mandalore, whatever."
Mhm. Do what you want. Um Ronaldo says maybe if the fight had been with Ahsoka, it would have been visually more exciting, but it makes more sense that it was with Dan. Absolutely, Ronaldo. I agree with you 100%. He also says in this episode, Gideon said that he brings order to the galaxy, and the Imperial officer said the same thing last episode. Do you think that was a nod to the First Order, or was just order, or was it just a coincidence?
No, that's kinda how that was the Empire all the way.
Yeah,
The
that's the whole
Empire,
Empire's philosophy.
sure. I mean, even when Palpatine, if you watch in the prequels, he was talking about, "And there shall be peace," he's gonna bring
Yeah.
peace and order to the galaxy. That's why everybody supported him. And
Hmm.
this kinda goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the episode, where it's like, look, most of the people looked at the Empire as as the Republic, because that's basically what happened. The Republic just became the Empire in their eyes.
Hmm.
It's a little different, but basically it's the legitimate government, and they looked at the rebels as terrorists, and basically the Empire was bringing peace and order to the galaxy. It was very much like a Nazi kind of thing, and that's what the Nazis were doing too. Their whole thing was like safety and security and, all this other stuff. And then of course you get the oppression, but that's not out there in the propaganda world. And it's the same thing with the Empire.
Right.
They people didn't know that Palpatine was a Sith, and they certainly didn't know all the atrocities that were going on. And again, if you haven't read that novel Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, you'd swear that I was getting an affiliate link or something off of this, but I'm not. But it's really good at doing this because it really shows you how there's certain people that start to find out what's really going on. And that's when things get a little bit interesting because, people are like seeing the atrocities, but for the most part, they don't. So to them, yeah, the Empire is just bringing order. And that's what these officers are looking at it like. They're so into this thing that they're not, they're even blind to their own atrocities. They think that they're doing this for the greater good.
Right.
Which is the most dangerous part about the whole thing. But yeah, so I thought that Gideon Din episode, because of course episode. I mean, scene. The actual battle was spectacular, but kind of like you, man. I mean, that whole dialogue leading up to it
Mm-hmm.
was just wonderful writing, and it's so enjoyable to watch. So
Oh yeah.
now, so then, okay, they duke it out, and then of course he beats him, which like you were saying, I was really kind of surprised by that. I thought
Well,
somehow, they were gonna give him the upper. I mean, they shouldn't have, but
they
I
should
thought,
have, but I'm glad. But see, I kind of could. It made sense because once again, if you recall back into that cantina scene, one of the stipulations was that like Bo-Katan wanted Gideon, but she never explained why she wanted Gideon.
well, and the other thing too is then you don't forget you got Kara going in there too. Like, hey, wait a second now. Want him alive though. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Like I
let's
need him
let's
because he's
let's
ISB. He has a
right.
lot of
Let's
ammunition.
clarify this and
Yeah,
you
let's get this
know,
all in writing.
right. Let's just get all this in order now. Like not when they're in the thick of battle. Let's, kind of let's just get all the cards on the table here.
Yeah, and so I understand why Kara, what I'm saying, why Gideon's valuable to her, and it makes her once again looks good as a marshal within the New Republic. But then Bo-Katan, she kind of says like, all right, she kind of gives part of the reason. She's like, well, he's in possession of this weapon, that's from Mandalore, but she doesn't explain like, okay, I need it so I can rule Mandalore, and I have to beat him in combat in order to do that.
Yeah, she left that part out. One of the things
Yeah,
that I thought was hilarious is Gideon's the one that's explaining all this.
yeah,
He's like,
exactly.
okay, because I mean, it was so hilarious too. It's like, okay, well, here you go. And Gideon's all like, nah, you have to, win it in combat or whatever. It's like, all right, I yield here.
Well, it's funny because it's funny because before then, like Gideon's like, "Are you leaving me alive?" Interesting.
Yeah, this is gonna get interesting. I mean, I thought
Yep,
that was
because
a great line
he
too.
already knew then. He knew then. So, so I love that aspect of Gideon. Once again, Gideon always kind of like, all right, I could turn these guys against each other, and so he's thinking like, all right, so he brings him in. Of course, you know, um, Bo-Katan is like shocked, like he's got the dark saber. He beat Gideon, so he has it. Of course, unbeknownst to Din, he's like, "All right, yep, here you go. Here's your dark saber."
Exactly. It's
All's
almost
right with
like
the
that
world.
whole Bob Gunn thing from Batman. Just hands her the dark saber. Like here you go.
And then so of course that's when Gideon starts explaining the whole lore behind the dark saber, and that's where it's like, okay, well, it has to be won in combat. And he's like, all right, well, fine, I yield. I basically.
Here's what's hilarious. I don't mean to interrupt, but this is just so hilarious to me. It's like you have Bo-Katan, and then you have Din,
Mhm.
right? They're
Right.
talking about this. Okay, Gideon starts to go, wait a second, here's all this stuff. Nobody turns to Gideon at any point and is just like, how do you know this?
Well, I mean, once again,
I mean, I guess
he's ISB. I mean, it's kind of like, why does the CIA know everything?
Bo-Katan actually know that he's ISB. I mean, do we all know like every?
Because that's what Kara said when she was in the cantina. She was like,
Oh
he's
yeah, right.
ISB. He has a lot of information that I could
right.
use.
I need him alive. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
fine. Still though, I mean, you might be ISB, but really, all the lore of Mandalore and the dark saber, which is like this very specific thing. I mean,
you got to understand that.
saying,
you got to think about it. Why would someone like him?
Well, then again, he has it though. Well, that's
exactly. Like,
why does he want it? How did he get it? Because if you're ruling Mandalore,
over it,
right? If you're if it's a whole thing where you're ruling Mandalore, he obviously wasn't trying to go back to Mandalore. He's just all like, sweet, I got kind of this lightsaber-ish thing.
Well, I think that's what his ultimate plan is. I think he wants to start the new kind of republic or his new empire on Mandalore. Remember, I said that he wanted to.
I don't think so. No, here's what I think. Because since we're kind of at the end anyway, basically, I'm pretty sure, because remember how they said they were tying this in loosely to the Rise of Skywalker? I think they needed Grogu's blood in order to resurrect Palpatine.
Right.
And I think what Moff Gideon is trying to do is he wants to be the new Vader. He wants to be Palpatine's right-hand man. So he's got his little dark saber,
He's dressing halfway like Vader.
kind of dressing halfway like Vader. I mean, this guy is definitely trying to get the job. That's
Just for the job you won.
and because think about it, he's the one that's actually trying to make all this stuff happen, right? He's the one that's trying to get the child and get the blood and all that. He wants to be the one to say, "Hey, you know that whole little resurrection thing you just did? Well, I made that happen."
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know, because the interesting thing is that if they hadn't mentioned Thrawn, like if Ahsoka never mentioned his name, you would have to wonder, well, where's Thrawn in this? But now you really wonder where he's in this, because I know you had theorized that Gideon's actually working for Thrawn. Now, if that's true, what we could be looking at is Thrawn's like, hey, when the Emperor kind of wakes up from his little dirt nap here, basically, I'll put in a good word for you. I'll tell him like, hey, this guy, the guy that's dressed up like Vader with his little like dark saber thing. Obviously, the guy wants the job. Maybe you should interview him. That kind of thing.
So essentially, Thrawn becomes the new Tarkin, and then
Yeah,
so he's over the military aspect of it, allowing Gideon to be the new Vader.
pretty much.
That's a good thought.
I mean,
I can see it.
It's a possibility. I mean, it's a possibility. Oh, did we get more? Yeah, we got some more
Yes,
chats.
you did.
Ronaldo's like, Sabine handed the saber to Bo without fighting, but did not accept that Din would give it to her. Do you think there's a plot hole where it'll be explained in season 3? That's one of the things that I was wondering too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, wait a minute. This whole thing that Gideon was saying, like, oh, no, you got to win at battle. And I'm thinking, since when? People were handing that thing back and forth to each other the whole time. When did all of a sudden it become like this battle that you had to do? So do I think it's a plot hole? No. And you know why? Because Filoni's involved. Filoni knows his own source material. Trust me.
Yeah.
He's the one that wrote a lot of those scenes. Some
Yeah,
would
he wrote
out,
I was like, he wrote the Clone Wars with that scene in it. So yeah,
yeah, knows. I mean, trust me, he knows about it. So I'm thinking it's probably something that's going to be explained, if not season 3, maybe season 4. I mean, we don't really know exactly how long this is going to go. Dwight says, or maybe because of the flack she got for just accepting it before and don't want that again. Good question. Yeah.
That's a good, that's a valid point.
That's true too. Maybe because maybe now Mandalore is in such a state that it's almost like you have to prove that you're worthy to rule Mandalore. And the only way to do that is
go back to the old way.
And getting it through combat. And that could very well be what it ends up being. But I promise you, Filoni's got that well in hand. Whether or not they actually explain it in the show,
we'll see.
It seems like that's where they're going, though, because it's kind of like what you were saying earlier in the episode where Bo-Katan's probably going to figure, like, she's going to live in the Mandalorian now. I think that she's going to figure really heavily in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they had to wrap up this whole
Grogu thing.
Yeah, this whole Grogu thing, because now they're going to shift focus to the whole Mandalorian, and maybe Gideon's role in this. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Gideon now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I love the fact that he basically tried to kill himself. It's just like,
I was about to say, yeah, just getting back into this whole last little probably like the last.
Yeah, we're in that home stretch now.
Yeah,
there's a lot to this.
So, that now they're trapped on the bridge, and the Dark Troopers have now decided to fly back through the ray shields and enter back into the ship.
Did that surprise you?
No, not really. I knew they couldn't be gone that far because, like I said, the fact that they came from space anyway down to pick up Grogu. I mean, I probably thinking like they're,
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying does it surprise you that they could. I'm saying, does it surprise you that they did that?
Oh no, because I mean, like at that point, like, okay, you have to have some climactic ending, and you have to put all the people in danger. And it's like, what else do you have, really?
That's a good point. I mean, it's kind of like they got Gideon.
I was like, they got Gideon in handcuffs. Everybody, he's got the dark saber. Everybody. Now, unless you wanted to show like, okay, Gideon was like a force user or something that would blow everybody's top, that would have been cool or different.
That would have been trippy.
Yeah, no one would have thought that. You
No
know, so
way. Like if he had got up and just started shooting everybody with lightning and stuff, I would have been like, well, okay. I mean, but then
uh-oh.
again, I'm glad they didn't do that
Right.
because
So
again, that would have just been like, ah,
right, I know. So when the Dark Troopers come back, now Gideon's kind of like, he's like, all right, he's like, look, I'm going to win here. What I'm saying, because you guys put up a good fight. It was cool, but then what it was like just fighting one of them. You can't stop a whole platoon with these guys. Like, there's no way.
yeah, you really felt, when those things were just like ramming at the door and they had shut the blast doors and those things were ramming and stuff. And it's just kind of like, he's like, yeah, you put up a valiant fight, but ultimately the only people left alive are going to be me and the kid.
Yep, that's
And,
it.
everybody else is,
Gonna be dead. So
and they knew it. I mean, they knew because, and Din especially knew because he actually fought one of those things. And it was like, okay, it took everything I had to just kill one. There's
right,
like, 60 of these things at this point.
right. So then, they're all standing around, and I even love how Gideon kind of did pull the whole what is his name? Hux. He pulled a Hux move with that whole blaster. How he kind of covered the blaster
Oh,
with
yeah.
tape. I thought that was
Yes,
slick.
that was great, man. I know
That
he
was real
covers it with the
slick.
cape. Like, okay, I'm just gonna save that for later.
Yep. And so when he did, he starts trying to start killing everybody in the room. And then of course he looks at the child because he knows like, all right, well, I already got what I need. I don't need this kid anymore. And then of course sacrificing himself once again, diving in front of the blaster bow and it's blocked by his Beskar. And it's like, okay,
Which was a really cool scene, I
yeah.
thought. I thought that was just awesome that he just flew in there and, now all the bolts are bouncing off. That was a great visual.
And so then I'm thinking like, okay. So then once he realizes, okay, that's not going to work. Then he tries to off himself. He tries to commit suicide because he knows way too much. And so he's like, well, okay, I don't want to, be put in a position where I'm taken prisoner and I could possibly, give up secrets. So he tries to kill himself, and then Cara Dune just completely like knocks him out, which was hilarious. But then but before that happens though, they see this X-Wing flying. Now at that point, I'm thinking, and you and I have had this conversation when we first.
Yeah, now we can actually talk about it publicly. But yeah, we had the conversation before Friday's show. Like, listen, we're gonna burst at the seams if we don't at least talk about this amongst ourselves.
At least to each other. So
But we didn't really want to talk about it too much because we want to keep the spontaneity, of course, of this conversation. But yeah.
So I saw the X-Wing fly in, and I'm thinking automatically it's the New Republic.
I totally thought it was a New Republic. That's how clueless I was because there's no way in the world I thought it would be what it was.
However, once Kara's like, oh wait, oh, one X-Wing, oh great, we're saved.
That was the best line. That was actually probably one of my favorite lines of the season. She's just she kind of delivered it's almost like a Han Solo type of thing.
Yeah, she did. Like,
Like, oh, single X-Wing, we're saved. Woohoo! It's
right. But then I thought about it to myself. I was like, single X-Wing. No, they're not doing this.
And that's exactly that was the exact thought process I went through. I'm like,
it was like a 5-second delay. Like,
I'm like,
wait,
nah.
I was like, no, they're not doing that. They're not doing it. And then especially when he didn't identify himself. And then next thing you know, they're like, Grogu's like up at the screen. And it's almost like he's like kind of orchestrating this whole thing. And then next thing you know, you see this cloak walking by. And you're like, oh no. So a lot of people, like my grandfather, thought it was Ahsoka. I'm like, nah, Ahsoka doesn't have an X-Wing.
Well, here's what's really funny about that, right? So the exact same thought process. X-Wing comes in, I'm like, nah, they're not doing that. No way. And then I started thinking, you know what? They're trying to fake us out. They're trying to make us think it's what it is.
So, but once that cloak came out, I already knew. I was like,
I was still kind of like, okay, this is what it looks like, but it wasn't until the green lightsaber came out.
Yeah, when the green lightsaber ignited and I saw that black glove,
Yes, I
Yeah,
was like,
it's a wrap.
no way,
I
because
was in my room losing it.
absolutely, because and the thing about this whole thing, the whole Luke Skywalker reveal part of it, if you really analyze that scene, it is totally the light side version of the Darth Vader scene of Rogue One.
Yeah, definitely.
It's completely kind of that same vibe.
The way he's just walking through, just mowing everything down.
And it just, one of the things that I really loved about this particular thing is the fact that he's kind of like EU Luke.
Yeah,
He's
a little bit.
basically like this super powerful grandmaster now that it's kind of like, okay, now he's the Luke Skywalker we wanted to see in the sequel trilogy.
The cool thing I loved about it, and I don't know if any people really paid attention to it, but they kept his lightsaber skills relevant to the original trilogy.
Yes.
They didn't make him like the prequel trilogy Jedi.
Well,
They
but then
kept
again,
his.
though, he could have been.
He could have been, but I'm saying like they did.
Later,
He wasn't flipping. He was still young, so he still could have been doing all of these flips and all this, but he didn't because they still kept it in. They kept it strictly into the point of.
This is where I'm getting off on this thing a little bit. I don't think they did it that way. I think it was really more of kind of like the super powerful, because you have to remember, it's no different than Vader or any of the other. Once you reach a certain level of power, you just don't have to do all that stuff. I mean, it's because if you think about it, a lot of the flipping and all that, besides it looking cool, there's definitely a combat purpose that the Jedi are using to do that. They're putting themselves in, more a better offensive or sometimes defensive position. There's different, and we all know the lightsaber forms and all this stuff.
Right.
Luke, Vader, all those guys are so powerful. They don't have to do all that because there's nothing these guys could do to them. Because and what I liked about it was he was using a combination of the Force and his lightsaber.
Yeah.
And his lightsaber strikes were so precise and dead on that, I mean, it was almost like it wasn't even hard. That's what I loved about the fact was that you saw Din just like absolutely just fighting for his life and struggling. And Luke is going through.
He's mowing him down like.
It's not even stopping him. Like, it's not even slowing down his pace.
Nope.
Walking, kind of, okay, I'm going to force throw one here, do that. And of course, at the end, when he tightens his grip and just crushes that last one. I was just like, man, that's just so cool. I mean, I was just like, man, I think I actually yelped when I saw that one.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were just all like, let's go, Luke. Like, I mean,
so calm. But I mean, the thing that's funny about it was Luke was one of the possibilities that we had brought up, because we had brought up as many YouTubers and because we're not just on YouTube, but using that more like the Kleenex term, right? So most of the people that are making videos, they basically were like, okay, it could be Luke, could be Mace, could be Ahsoka, Ezra. I thought it might have been that Fallen Order guy begins with a C.
Cal?
Yeah.
Cal Katis?
Yes. I don't know why I can't remember that guy's name, but yeah, there, and of course, honestly, it was Cal, Ezra. Those are the ones that we thought were more.
I thought it was going to be Ezra or Luke. Honestly,
Luke was the one I really. It was one of the ones that was definitely possible, and it should have been because of the time period.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, it would have made the most sense. Ronaldo says, when I saw the X-Wing, I thought Rebel pilot, but then when Grogu raised his ears, it was clear that he was a Jedi. I raised my arms, cried, sweated, and jumped when I saw that green lightsaber. I feel you, brother. Luke's appearance is totally fan service, but it makes all the sense in the world considering what's going on in canon right now. Exactly. And that's my point. Like, how do you have something like that that's so powerful? Not even talking about Grogu himself, but just this whole seeing stone. And you have Luke Skywalker, who's essentially the grandson of the Force, not feel that.
Yeah, I mean,
it wouldn't make sense.
It would.
I mean, you could always say like, well, maybe like, of course, you can always give an explanation of why he didn't respond, but you got to acknowledge the fact that he felt that, though. You know what I mean? His face was looked like Luke from Battlefront 2, but it didn't take me out of the scene. Watching him destroy those Dark Troopers was fantastic. It was so Darth Vader from Rogue One. Yes. So like, yeah, when he was just kind of like walking through and just like mowing those guys down, and then like how those Dark Troopers stopped, they were just kind of like, okay, apparently there's a problem. They're like, well, why did they stop?
Exactly. And it's like, they're like, because you got to figure, because at first it confused me too, but then I started thinking about it. They're
all kind of connected.
Yeah, exactly. It almost like you see that a little bit in the Phantom Menace. Although at that point they're, kind of like the Borg, right? But they were controlled from a ship. But still, you see this in the Clone Wars cartoon or animated series, sorry. And you see other instances where it is almost kind of like a hive mind in a way. It's kind of like a central computer. But yeah, they're probably like, hey, man, there's something's up.
we got a problem down here.
And I love the fact that they basically showed that how powerful these guys, back when they kidnapped Grogu, actually. And they were basically unstoppable then.
Yeah.
And all this stuff was leading up to the fact that Luke is going through there and just taking these things out like it's nothing. Like, I mean, he might as well just been walking down the hallway.
Yep.
Because nothing was stopping him.
Nope. Exactly. And the fact that he hopped in the elevator and he was just kind of waiting. And I was just kind of wondering, like, okay, what is he going to do? Like when this door is open, what's going to happen? Like, I didn't know if he was going to like force push them all, or if he was just going to come out just cutting them down just like left and right. Well, like, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Here's the thing that I think was hilarious about that. And once again, this is the Luke that we wanted to see, is that there's no he's not like hiding up at the top or anything and then like jumps down. The door's open. He's just already there and just like, all right, continue. All right. Nothing. I mean, it was like, all these things are lined up to shoot him or whatever. And it's nothing.
I don't even care.
Doesn't even care. Doesn't even slow him down. He's not concerned at all. He's very calm,
Yeah. And so when he gets to that final one, man, and that's what was so cool. Like you said, like once he stopped the blaster from firing, because I don't know if people picked that up. Yeah. He actually stopped the blaster from firing and then he crunched him. I was like,
I know the thing's all like vibrating and stuff. And it just like crunches. And I'm like, wow, dude, that's just like,
and everyone like, because then it's like open the door.
Before all that, though, this is something that I definitely want to make sure to bring up, because this is a very vital thing that some people didn't miss, but I think a lot of people did, is the absolute terror on Gideon's face when he realized who it was.
Yep.
And that was definitely significant.
Yeah, when Bo-Katan's like a Jedi and, Gideon's like, huh?
Yeah, like, well, which one?
Yeah, exactly. Because he's old enough to remember them. That's the thing. Like, and he knows about them especially because of Vader. So he's like, okay, well, if a Jedi's around, like, all right, I know my Dark Troopers aren't ready for that.
And being 6 years later, he also knows Luke is the one that took out Palpatine and Vader. He knows who Luke really is.
Especially being ISB, yeah, he definitely knows.
So I mean, he's probably like I thought that was a brilliant touch that those guys did, that they just showed, because this is also the first time that not only is he not confident anymore, but he's terrified. He's not just scared. I mean, he's petrified.
Well, yeah, because he's took down the two people that ran his whole government. I mean, you take down Vader and the Emperor. I mean,
and he knows how powerful they are, because I believe that Gideon knows exactly who Palpatine is. Yeah.
Otherwise, he wouldn't need the midichlorians. You got to think about that.
Right.
He wouldn't need them, because why would you think about that if you didn't?
Like I said, and I really do believe that Gideon is in on that plan. Dwight says, well, if you're about to come face to face with the Jedi who most things killed Vader and the Emperor, he'd be scared too. Exactly.
Definitely.
And that's one of the things that I think was so cool, was actually seeing him that freaked out. It's like, yeah, okay, you're talking tough on all these other guys. It's Luke Skywalker now, buddy. It's like, what are you going to do now? And I think that that's great, because that's what we wanted to see. It's not so much that with The Last Jedi and all that it wasn't kind of cool to see a disillusioned, disenfranchised, disappointed, all other disses that you can think of Luke. I think what the problem was and why a lot of fans reacted so toxic was because it's the first thing that we see after all this stuff.
Yeah.
This is the Luke that everybody wanted to see. I think that if you put Luke in this light first and then maybe explored him being that way, I think it might have been a little bit better. But when you're talking about, okay, yay, 30 years, there's going to be new Star Wars movies, and it's going to be with the original cast in there, there's certain expectations that come with that. This met those expectations.
Yeah, going back, Ronaldo said, even made me understand why Lucas decided to use droids in the prequels instead of real soldiers. Maybe a Jedi doesn't look so heroic killing real people. That's a good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. And he says, do you think the fact that it was a deep fake rather than a real actor means they don't plan on using it much again? Well, don't forget, yeah, I mean, a lot of times, because here's the thing that's funny about that. I actually, for a second, was like, hey, is that Sebastian Stan?
That's what I was thinking too, man. I was like, yo, like, did they really? Because I was waiting for them to, like, once he revealed, like, lifted the hood, I was wondering if they were actually, like, going to CG Mark Hamill, or was it going to be Sebastian Stan as Mark Hamill, or as Luke Skywalker, I should say. And so when they finally, revealed it, and it was like, all right, it's a DH Mark Hamill. I'm like, okay, well, what does this mean? So, but then I had to listen to, what he was saying. And, of course, he's like, are you a Jedi? I am. And then he's kind of like, all right, well, he's like, he's not going to leave you because you haven't given him permission to. And I just love, once again, how calm Luke was. Like, he was very calm, very, kind of instructing. And, he's, mind you, this is after some years, like 6 years after Return of the Jedi. So he's definitely grown even within that period of time.
Sure. That's basically what I'm saying. And it's true because, everybody else is like, okay, I'm going to open the door. They're like, are you nuts? Right. Especially the Mandalorians, because you know how they had felt about the Jedi. So they were kind of like,
But my thing is like, dude, you think this door is really going to stop him? I mean, well, like, you really got to just ask that question.
It was cool though that Luke waited. Like, he waited until, he was let in. Like, he didn't force his way in or anything else like that. Ronaldo says putting R2 together with Grogu was so cute. It was. And actually, I thought
I didn't expect to see R2 either. Huh? That was actually a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see R2.
Neither did I. When he rolled out there, I was just like, I mean, I lost my mind again. I was like, no way. They've actually put R2 in there. That was a great, again, they handled that whole scene perfectly. Once again.
I'm gonna let you go into this because, since you had such an emotional connection to it. So when Grogu, saying like he's holding on to Din's leg, like, almost like, I don't want to leave you. And, he picks him up and he's holding him and he's having this conversation with him. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just that whole scene was way more touching than I expected it to be. Way more touching.
A lot of people likened it to the end of E.T.
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, it was definitely, it had that kind of vibe to it. I'm like, I never expected. I mean, one of the things that's really cool is if you look at where Din was at the beginning of season 1 and where he is now, he's grown so much as a person, not just as a Mandalorian. And I think that it's great because one of the things that really was making me cry, besides, Grogu was just looking even cuter than usual. But besides that and the emotion of it, the thing that really got to me was he removed his helmet in front of everybody.
Yeah.
This wasn't like, okay, you're technically a droid or I'm going to just do this. I mean, he didn't take Grogu off into another room. He just was like, you know what?
Here it is.
I'm laying it all out there for you, buddy. I mean, that's kind of what it was. And it was just like, oh man, I can't, I'm getting such an overload of emotions here. I cannot believe how effective this is, because this is one of those things, again, I expected it to be a really good season finale, but I did not expect it to be this effective, especially emotionally. I was pleasantly surprised, actually.
Yeah, I think one of the best parts of it for me, it wasn't so much that. I mean, because of course he's like, I'll always be around or I'll be here for you, whatever
Yep.
the case may be. But it wasn't that, and it was the part where Grogu actually like looked at Luke, then held his arms up like, okay, I'm ready.
Yep.
Like when he made that conscious decision within himself to say, like, okay, all right, I accept you as my new master, pretty much. And then
He's
Luke
probably
went
like,
down and picked him up.
okay, don't kill me. You're a little bit, I'll listen to you, man. Like that Ahsoka chick wasn't mowing down these crazy droids. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's, but no, I know what you mean. It's true. It was almost like he's ready to move on, which was also a nice thing too, because that was one of the primary differences between Anakin. Anakin really wasn't ready to move on.
Mm-hmm.
He still had the attachments. He didn't want to leave his mom. He wanted to take her with him. He still had all this fear and attachment and all this stuff. Whereas Grogu definitely loves Din and is emotionally attached to him to a degree, but it's kind of like, okay, I love you. You're kind of like my dad, but I am ready for this new challenge.
Yeah. So like that whole like, walk down that corridor and then him going into that elevator. And you kind of see that fine Grogu's still looking back at him, and he's Cara Dune is looking, Bo-Katan is looking, and then they finally get to the elevator, and then the door closes, and it's just like, all right, there it is.
Yeah, now Ronaldo says, I think there was no better way to remove Grogu from the series than with Luke taking him away. And absolutely. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was such a perfect ending
Yeah, and
to this
satisfying.
thing and satisfying to this storyline. I mean, I thought that it was a really, really fantastic. And again, it exceeded all of my expectations, like literally all of them. Ronaldo also says, I have a little question. That's good. When Ahsoka saw Grogu's relationship with Din, she said that personal attachments are dangerous for Jedi. Luke clearly noticed that attachment, but seemed to have no problem with it. Do you think this means that Ahsoka still follows the old ways of the Jedi and Luke decided to change them, but Ahsoka doesn't know? No, I think that this is the growth. I think that this is, at the time that Ahsoka met him, he was still having that problem. And now he's ready to let go.
I think, well, to Ronaldo's point, I think you have to remember that, Din is trying to help him become a Jedi or put him back in the custody of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka no longer follows the Jedi way. She knows what it is, obviously. So she's saying, like, okay, well, if he's going to become a Jedi, this is going to be a problem for him because of attachments is not something that, the Jedi subscribe to. However,
That's a good point, too. Yeah.
When Luke shows up and he notices the attachment to him, it's kind of like, all right, well, he probably figures like there's ways around that or how to deal with those attachments and get control of your attachments.
But I don't know if I don't necessarily think that, I mean, I agree with that, but I think that Grogu's attachment changed. It's not so much an attachment as it is just, I mean, I get it, loving something or whatever, but it's not loving something to possession. That was the problem that Anakin had.
Mm-hmm.
Anakin loved things to possession almost. Like he couldn't let go.
Whereas, go ahead.
Well, Grogu is kind of like no different than, it's when a kid goes to college, right? I mean, they love their parents, they miss them, but they're ready for that next challenge. Whereas flash forward to back when you start kindergarten for the first time, you're crying, you're like, don't leave me, I don't want to,
I don't know who these people are, they're weird.
Right. Because it's a new experience. You're not ready for it. But by the time you go to college, now you've grown enough. You're ready to move on. You're ready for that new challenge. You're ready to take on, what is meant for you to take on. But you still love your parents. You still love home. You're still going to miss them. And I think that that's where Grogu is at now. I think with Ahsoka, it was more, and even through season 1 and definitely through 2, Grogu was still at that kindergarten stage. Like, hey, I don't want to. Because remember when he left her for the frog lady, frog family a few times. He was kind of, I mean, he was okay with it, but he was obviously like, you're coming back though, right? In each instance.
Well, see, the other thing you have to think about too, though, and remember, Grogu at this point is 50 years old.
Well, but we don't know what that's like in
True, but what I'm saying though
Baby Yoda
is,
years.
but what I'm saying that he's 50 years old. So I guess we can surmise that he's been with the Jedi this whole. Remember, he's actually been trained.
Yeah.
So these
true.
things have probably already been instilled in him from day one. It's just that like now he's like, okay, I'm back with something familiar. Like I can feel the force in this particular person. So this is familiar because remember he was taken from the temple by another Jedi and it was hidden. So he's been away from that for so long. And it's like, okay, well, he was always taught to hide his abilities. So once again, he's retained a lot of this information. So I think that now with the advent of Luke Skywalker showing up, it's like, okay, this is familiar now. Like I have someone I can relate to, no different than how he related to Ahsoka. That's why she was able to find out all this information about him because she was like, okay, I can connect with you on a level that the Mandalorian can't. You have your place in my life. And I think that's another thing too. Is like you have your place in my life where I care about you.
Right.
But I understand that, like this is maybe my destiny. I just haven't been able to get back to it yet.
Well,
but
I
now
think
I have someone who can actually show me that now.
But it's important too that you bring up a good point because up until then, it's all these Force users, stuff like that. This is probably one of the first non-Force users that he ever really cared about.
Right.
So I think that that's important too. And I think that the way that you put it was good is the fact that, because I think it's actually a combination of all this stuff. I think on one hand, it's kind of like before, he was leaving for kindergarten, now he's leaving for college and he's ready for these new challenges. But I should put it like this. He's ready to go back to the life that he once knew, which puts it a little bit more into the context of what you're talking about.
Ronaldo says, so when I stopped crying when they left me in kindergarten, did I become a Jedi?
Maybe.
Yes. Or at least a Padawan.
You can answer that. I'll tell you what, go sit on like some seeing stone somewhere and see if somebody
the solstice is going on, so apparently it's supposed to grant us superpowers. So I'm supposed to be like,
he says, I've heard the comments saying that Kylo Ren killed Grogu. Oh, that would be awful. But I honestly don't think that the story ends that way.
It could possibly happen.
It could be.
We don't know.
I mean, why not? Right?
I mean, he did destroy that temple, and that's why Luke was like,
it's very much a possibility. I'm curious on what the end story is going to be with Grogu because, okay, he goes off and he's training with Luke. Is there a point where this guy ever speaks English?
Well, I'm sure at some point.
Basic, I should say.
Yeah, basic.
Anything like that. And does he talk backwards like Yoda does? Is that like a sort of a species thing, or is that just
bad teacher?
Or I mean, what's the deal with that? And where is his end story? That would actually be interesting to see if they filled in some of those gaps. I don't think they're going to do it for a while, but it could very well be that we find out that, Kylo's the one that offed him, which is yet another reason to hate Kylo Ren.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the comic, The Rise of Kylo Ren, I mean, he was facing off, but he was still kind of Ben Solo. So he was having, he was almost at that Anakin point. Like, I don't want to have to destroy you, but if you force my hand, gonna make it happen.
All right. So final thoughts. What do you expect for season 3?
That's tough. I think that what we can look forward to in season 3 is definitely more of a focus on Bo-Katan, Gideon, the Darksaber, and Din's role in Mandalore, because as we're leaving it off, Din's the one with the Darksaber, which means, according to this little rule that they've come up with, he's the one that has the right to rule Mandalore. Bo-Katan, on the other hand, is kind of like, okay, I like this guy, but I kind of want to rule Mandalore. So I might have to do what I have to do. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they interweave that story. But I think that that's honestly where the story is going to go. Because I don't think we're going to deal with Grogu too much, if at all, in season 3. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see.
Do you think there's going to be a budding relationship between Din and Kara?
It would be kind of cool. That's a good question because the whole romance thing, something we haven't seen yet in this series.
Yeah, Ronaldo says the fight choreography. Do you like what fight choreography do you like the most? Luke's or Ahsoka's? I think Luke's style is more elegant and attractive.
Well, I think that's deliberate though because Luke is a grandmaster.
Is he a grandmaster at this point though?
Oh yeah, yeah. They're definitely making him a grandmaster at this point. I mean, because he was pretty much a grandmaster. They seem to be plucking him from more characteristics of the old EU. This is about kind of the level of power or where he's at, around there. I mean, you got to remember that he was gifted anyway. He's like one of those prodigies, right? Look at all he picked up in a couple of weeks of training. Now imagine you have like more than 6 years because you also have to count the time a little bit before Return of the Jedi as well. So, but even if you don't, from where we see him last in Return of the Jedi to where he is now, he's got like 5 or 6 years. So, yeah, he's definitely super powerful. And even if anybody wanted to debate the whole, Grandmaster thing, he's definitely way more powerful than Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So that's where you get a little bit of that whole different fighting style thing is that's why it's more elegant because he doesn't need to do all that. Ronaldo also says, for the 3rd season, I hope to see a conflict between Din and Bo with the Darksaber. Maybe Boba gets involved in some way. I think he will because I don't think that was throwaway dialogue as far as the whole you're not a real Mandalorian thing. And then he also says, and I think it is very possible that with this conflict, it is very likely that Sabine will appear.
I agree with that part. I think she will appear.
Wholeheartedly.
And I think that's when we're going to see Thrawn too.
Yeah, because now here's a question. Do you think we're going to see Ahsoka though?
Possibly. Maybe like, okay, maybe Denton is going to go tell Ahsoka that like, oh, this guy, showed up. Oh, what did he look like? It's like, well, I don't know his name because they never asked him his name either. They just asked, are you a Jedi? They never said like, well, who are you?
Yeah, it's pretty much like, yeah, all right, he's good.
So
that is true, right? Because they don't. I mean, it would be interesting to see because the more pertinent question is Luke going to be in season 3? See, we're assuming that Luke is just okay, a one and done kind of thing, but we don't know.
We don't know, but I don't think we're going to see it because I think once again, it's going to detract from like this whole new fleshed out. Like you got a whole season just with Gideon, Bo and Mando. So I think like you have and Kara, so that's a whole.
That didn't stop him on this though. Look at all the characters they introduced.
True story. But I'm just saying, like,
I mean, don't forget the shows that we used to do, like maybe 3 or 4 months out. So like maybe back in the summer, and they were just announcing new character after new character or actor even, and it's kind of like, okay, how on earth are they going to cram all this into 8 episodes? So
right.
But here's the thing too. Now this goes into a question for you. You did see the article I sent you about the idea of them doing a Luke Skywalker series, right?
Yeah.
So do you think, first of all, do you think that's going to happen? And second, if it does, do you think that maybe putting him a little bit into the Mandalorian, since that's the live action show we have now, would lead into that? Or more importantly, do you think it's more likely he'll show up in the Ahsoka series?
I think Luke is probably going to cross over into Ahsoka, and I mean, if they choose to give Luke his own story, Mark Hamill's already given his blessing for Sebastian Stan.
Yeah, at some point they got to introduce him.
And if they do that, then it's like, okay, well, then I believe that Sebastian Stan will probably be the guy to take over the mantle of Luke Skywalker in this time period.
I think so too, because a lot of times people have said, oh, are they going to do a de-aging Mark Hamill all the time? I think
Eh,
they just did that just to satisfy the fans.
yeah, just to kind of create that continuity.
Yeah.
But I think, going into, if they do a Luke Skywalker series, it's going to be Sebastian Stan. It's way too expensive to try to do that technology for like seasons upon season, every episode.
I was
Yeah.
actually impressed with it. I thought for a television budget, that was slamming, man.
Oh yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
dude. Okay, we got another viewer actually. Rumor and Theory. You guys crush your videos.
I
Yeah,
mean, I appreciate it.
absolutely, man. Much appreciated,
Much
And
appreciated, man.
hopefully,
Uh,
you join us on Fridays at 8 and chat with us then. He also goes Ronaldo. Or no, I'm sorry.
Rumor is that Mando season 3 would take place years down the line. Actually, and I guess they actually made a video on it. So okay, we got to check that out.
Yeah, we got to check that out because that was something that I had heard too, that there was going to be a big time jump in between 2 and 3, and that's certainly possible. What do you
Ronaldo's
think of well, before we get to Ronaldo, just with the Rumor and Theory, what do you think of the whole idea of maybe Thrawn appearing in season 3, or do you think that that's going to be held for another series? Okay. Ronaldo says, I think Thrawn will be the Thanos of this connected series. It's an interesting take on it.
Yeah, but I like it though.
I do too. I think that that would be a good idea. I think that Thrawn being sort of like the Thanos, sort of like a cross,
Cross series.
Yeah.
Cross series villain. Like, yeah, I could definitely see him because, like I said, it's the galaxy, and I could see him trying to, if he pops back up into this sector of the galaxy, he's trying to figure out what's going on. I could see, Gideon trying to get on his side. Like, if he's not already doing things for Thrawn, I could see him trying to associate with Thrawn. Like, hey, I'm one of you. Help me out here. Get me away from these guys. And then we can kind of together kind of do this whole thing. I could see that. I could see them trying to then, okay, if Ezra pops up, I could see him trying to find Luke. I mean, there's so many different things that you could do.
Gideon, honestly, you're seeing Luke, Ahsoka, and if you see Ezra and all these, I'd be like, okay, listen, how many of these Jedi are around? This is starting to be like the prequel era here. It's like there's more of these guys around now than there were back then. I mean, what's up with that?
Yeah. I could definitely see it.
But yeah, that would actually be a really cool idea, is if they made Thrawn kind of the connective tissue between all the series. And it sounds like that's
Luke
what they're doing.
Luke might be the Nick Fury.
Well, what's funny about that is that they did say that Disney and Lucasfilm were consciously taking a very Marvel direction with the TV shows, which I think will eventually find its way into films. We got another person, Paxton Games. Do you think Kylo killed Grogu when he attacked Luke?
It's possible.
Yeah, it's really too early to tell, because I don't know if you ever read the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series, where it sort of takes place right around the time Kylo starts to turn and he attacks some of his friends, and it's kind of heartbreaking actually, but they don't really go into a whole lot of specific characters, but it's kind of looking like that could be the case. Like, I mean, I can't, because you have to figure out where Grogu is at this point, right?
Yeah.
You introduce this guy, it's like, okay, well, where is he now by the time of the sequel trilogy? And this is the problem when you start introducing these characters in these timelines like this that are bumping up against the different saga films. Is like, look, you have to explain their absence eventually.
Yeah, eventually, I think we'll get to it.
Maybe. We'll see. But what about you guys? Definitely in the comments section, leave us what you thought overall about this series. And hey, while you're there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button, and then also hit the notification bell, because as you guys can see, we're coming out with more and more new content. We stream live every Fridays, which we'll continue to do at 8 o'clock, except for this Friday, because it is Christmas Day. I actually forgot about that. I was about to go, okay, man, what's the outline? What are we doing? And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's Christmas. I guess we'll get a pass on that, because I don't even think we're going to have time to pre-record anything. But I don't know. Maybe I'll jump on for a little bit. I'll see what Daryl's doing. Maybe we'll do another impromptu one. Who knows? We might want to get away from the family in Christmas. Who knows?
Right.
We'll see what family's doing. But, take a look. But more than likely, we probably won't have a show this Friday, but we will, even though it's New Year's Day, we will have a show the following Friday. So we stream every Fridays at 8. On Mondays at 8, we're going to start to do more content. Drop a comment in the comment section and tell us what kind of content you would like to see from us. What do you want us to talk about? Because we're out of Mandalorian episodes now. I mean, yeah, we can go back and do the Clone Wars and Rebels and all that stuff and, go episode by episode and talk about that. It's totally up to you guys.
Yep.
All right, but I think that is going to do it for our show today.
Yeah, I want to wish everybody happy holidays, those who are celebrating, and hope you have some great times with your loved ones. Be safe, mask up. Those of you who are living in areas, especially with high concentration of the COVID-19. So I want you guys to enjoy your holiday, but be safe.
That's right. All right, well, with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.